The first banks were temples, and the first loan sharks were priests. Forget the marble vaults and pinstripe suits. 5,000 years ago, if you needed to borrow grain to plant your fields, you didn't walk into a bank, you walked into a ziggurat. You knelt in front of a man in a linen robe who spoke for the gods, and you signed your debt into wet clay. That clay tablet was a contract enforceable by heaven itself. The priests of Uruk, and Babylon weren't only running rituals. They were running the largest grain silos in the known world, the only standardized weighing equipment, and the only literate record keepers on Earth. Whoever controls the food, the scales, and the writing controls money. They controlled all three. We tell ourselves money was invented to make barter easier. That is the comforting story economists put in textbooks. The archaeological record tells a darker one. Money wasn't born in a marketplace. It was born in a temple ledger. And the first thing it tracked wasn't trade. Here is what your high school textbook got wrong. The classic story goes like this. Ancient people traded chickens for sandals, got tired of it, and invented coins to make life easier. Anthropologists have spent a century looking for that barter society. They have never found one. Not anywhere. Not once. What they found instead, baked into clay tablets older than the pyramids, was debt. Sumerian scribes were tracking how much barley a farmer owed the temple, how much silver a merchant owed a rival, how many days of labor a tenant owed his landlord, 1,000 years before the first coin was ever struck. The unit they used was the shekel. And a shekel was not a coin. A shekel was a weight of barley. Specifically, the amount of barley a temple worker was paid for 1 month of labor. Money was an accounting trick before it was ever a piece of metal. It existed to answer one question and one question only. The Sumerians did something no human had ever done before. They charged you for time. A standard loan in Babylon ran at 20% interest on silver and 33% on grain, rates that would make a modern credit card company blush. And these rates were not negotiated. They were written into law, codified in the same stone tablets that gave us Hammurabi's eye for an eye. The priest bankers had figured out something diabolical. If you loan a farmer seed in spring at 33% and his harvest fails, he cannot pay. So next year he borrows again, now owing the original debt plus interest plus a new loan. Within 3 bad seasons, he owes more than his farm is worth. Within 5, he owes more than his life is worth. And that is when the priests came to collect. Not the silver, because there was no silver. They came to collect his wife, his children, him. Think about what this means. The mathematical concept of compound interest, the engine of every modern fortune from the Medici to Wall Street, was first weaponized by Bronze Age priests against illiterate farmers who could not—
3 drought years in a row. You owe the temple more grain than your fields will ever produce. Your eldest daughter is already working in the priest's household to service the interest. Your son will go next. Then your wife, then you. And then one morning a herald rides into the village and shouts a single word, Amargi. It means, literally, return to the mother. Your debts are erased, all of them. Your daughter walks home. Your land is yours again. The clay tablet recording what you owed has been smashed in the temple courtyard. The new king has declared a clean slate. This happened, on average, once every generation across Mesopotamia for nearly 2,000 years. Hammurabi did it 4 times in his reign. Why? Because the priest bankers were too good at their job. Without periodic debt jubilees, the entire population would have been swallowed into debt bondage within a few decades. The army would have collapsed because soldiers were enslaved, and the kingdom would have died. The Bronze Age had figured out something we have completely forgotten. A debt that cannot be paid will not be paid. The only question is who breaks first, the
For
debtor.
3,000 years, money was clay tablets and weighed lumps of silver. Then, around 600 BCE, in a small kingdom called Lydia, in what is now Western Turkey, a king named Alyattes did something nobody had ever bothered to do. He took small, identical lumps of electrum, a natural alloy of gold and silver, stamped them with the royal seal of a lion's head, and guaranteed their weight. The coin was born, and it changed everything. Suddenly, money was not just a record in a temple ledger. It was a thing you could carry in your pocket, hide under your floorboards, and hand to a stranger who did not know you and did not trust you. For the first time in history, an ordinary peasant could participate in the economy without going through a priest. Lydia's capital, Sardis, exploded into one of the richest cities on earth. King Alyattes' son was named Croesus, and we still say richest Croesus today. But the coin had a hidden poison. Because once a king controlled the mint, the king controlled the metal in the coin. And kings, it turns out,
Fast forward 600 years to Rome. The denarius, a small silver coin paid to every legionary as wages, is the most trusted currency in the Mediterranean. Under Augustus, it is 98% pure silver. Then, in 64 CE, Emperor Nero needs money. Rome has just burned. The treasury is empty. The legions on the frontier are demanding pay. So Nero does something quietly evil. He orders the mint to reduce the silver content of new denarii to 93% and to keep the same face value. The other 5% he keeps. Nobody notices at first. The coins look the same. But the precedent is set. Trajan drops it further. Marcus Aurelius drops it again. By the reign of Gallienus, 2 centuries later, the silver denarius is less than 5% silver, a bronze slug with a silver wash so thin it rubs off in your palm. Prices in Rome rise 1,000% in 50 years. Soldiers refuse to be paid in coin and demand grain instead. Merchants stop accepting Roman money in the provinces. The empire's economic spine snaps, not from invasion, not from plague, but from emperors who could not stop shaving their own currency. Every fiat currency in human history has eventually been debased by the people who issued it. Every single one. The Roman denarius is not a cautionary tale from a dead empire. It is a pattern.
When Rome fell, the coins did not come back for centuries, but debt did. In medieval Europe, a peasant who could not pay his lord's tax did not get a payment plan. He got a brand. Debt bondage, legally selling yourself, your wife, or your children to your creditor, was practiced in some form from Anglo-Saxon England to Byzantine Greece for the next 1,000 years. In parts of Eastern Europe, it lasted into the 1860s. The church, which had inherited the role of the temple banker, officially banned charging interest to fellow Christians, calling it the sin of usury, punishable by excommunication. But the loans did not stop. They simply moved to a population the church had decided was not Christian. Jewish moneylenders, banned by law from almost every other profession, were funneled into banking by the very institution that condemned them for it. Then, when kings ran up debts they could not pay, those same kings expelled the lenders, seized their books, and erased the debts. England in 1290, France in 1306, Spain in 1492. The clean slate was back, only now—
Meanwhile, on the other side of the world, China was solving a different problem. By the 11th century, Song dynasty merchants had grown so wealthy that hauling around copper coins had become physically impossible. A modest business transaction might require a wagon. So in the city of Chengdu, a group of merchants invented something radical, a piece of paper issued by a trusted firm promising to pay the bearer a certain number of coins on demand. It was called jiaozi, the first banknote. The government watched this for a while, then did what governments always do. It took over. By 1024, the Song state was printing its own paper money, and printing it in quantities the merchants never had.
Nobody trusted paper, so the emperor's printers added a feature you will not find on a modern dollar bill: a warning printed directly onto the note stating that anyone caught counterfeiting the bill would be beheaded. The reward for reporting a counterfeiter? You got his property. The world's first paper currency was secured not by gold, not by silver, but by the executioner's blade. And within 2 centuries, just like the Roman denarius, the song printed too much of it. Hyperinflation, collapse. The paper became...
Skip ahead to 17th century London. Wealthy merchants store their gold with goldsmiths who have the only sturdy vaults in town. The goldsmith hands you a paper receipt for your gold. Soon, people realize it is easier to pay a debt by handing over the receipt than by going to fetch the gold itself. The receipts begin to circulate as money. And then the goldsmiths notice something. On any given day, only a tiny fraction of depositors actually come to claim their gold. So a clever goldsmith starts writing new receipts for gold that does not exist and lending them out at interest. As long as everyone does not show up at once, nobody notices. The depositor still thinks his gold is in the vault. The borrower thinks he is holding real money, and the goldsmith is collecting interest on gold he never had. Modern banking was born in that moment. Every bank on earth today operates on the same principle. It is called fractional reserve, and it means that the money in your checking account is not actually sitting in a vault somewhere. It was loaned out the day you deposited it, probably several times over. Your money exists only as long as you and everyone else agree not to ask for it at the same time. This is the secret hiding in plain sight at the heart of every modern economy. Money is no longer a thing. It is a promise, and a promise only works.
From a Sumerian priest pressing a debt into clay, to Nero shaving silver from his own coins, to a Song emperor threatening to behead counterfeiters, to a London goldsmith inventing money out of thin air. The story of money has never really changed. Someone with power decides what counts as money. Someone in debt has no choice but to use it. And every few generations, the whole system has to be torn up and rewritten because the debts have grown larger than the world can carry. The Sumerians knew this. They called it amargi, return to the mother, and they performed it like a religious rite. We do not perform it anymore. We have replaced the clean slate with bankruptcy court, bailouts, and quantitative easing, fancier words for the same ancient admission. A debt that cannot be paid will not be paid. 5,000 years of human history say the same thing. The only question, the only one that has ever mattered, is who is holding the clay tablet when the king walks into the courtyard, and who is standing in the field waiting for the word amargi to ride into town.